Good afternoon. I'm Dara Bunjon. I'm the food enthusiast here at J Moore Living. I'm a food writer, food stylist, PR maven, and a frustrated baker. Those of you joining us live, drop your questions in the comment box and I will check from time to time. You might see me turn my head. Today's guest is a Mississippi Delta native, Martha Foose, from working at La Brea Bakery, and that is the legendary La Brea Bakery in Los Angeles, to attending École Linatra Baking School in Paris. I'm not sure I said that correctly. To opening multiple bakeries, she has done it all. It comes at no surprise that Foose is known for her expertise in French pastries and cookbooks. Foose's cookbook, Screen Doors and Sweet Tea, won the James Beard Award, while another one of her cookbooks, A Southerly Course, has won praise worldwide. Furthermore, she is recognized as one of the most acclaimed food writers and pastry chefs in America, and I just can't wait to hear her Southern accent. Let's welcome Martha.
I'm just tickled to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you here. Other than doing the show today and trying to grab some decent sleep, what else is on your plate for the day?
Well, our day kicks off here at 11:30 the day before. So, we've already been through laminating uh, over 19 dozen croissants, just butter ones. Then my husband's been making uh, he does most of his bread with no commercial yeast. So, this wonderful wild rice bread and ciabattas, and so he's got all of that going on, and a great cheddar chive biscuit. And then we're prepping all the stuff for tomorrow, and then also moving my son back to school at Mississippi State over the weekend, and looking forward to that 113-degree heat index for
I
the
saw that. I bet you can't wait to be in the bakery with all those ovens going.
yeah. It's it's amazing. We haven't run a bakery in 10 years. My husband's been working at a big tool manufacturer, and I've just been writing for 10 years. And so to get back into the business and just the innovation and everything, like when we started, our last bakery was almost 20 years ago. And we were still trying to explain what a ciabatta was to somebody. Well, now Sonic has a sandwich and a ciabatta. So just to see the evolution of what people know about baking these days, and post pandemic, when everybody was baking. So I think people are a lot more enthusiastic about baking right now.
Yeah, well, the pandemic gave something new for people to do. Now, you heard my intro every week is I'm a frustrated baker because it's a science. I can throw this together and that together, but baking, unless you know the science, you can't just throw stuff in.
And I think that also, I think in a little bit of a way, people that are really good bakers, and I'm not saying that like the really great bakers, but the people that are really good bakers, I think they like to kind of hold that myth over people, because it's like people that think they make the world's best pie crust. They're always like, "Oh, it's so easy. Why can't you just throw together a pie crust?" But a lot of it's just finesse, because it can be different every single day. And it's one of the things Donald and I love about it, is that it could be a thunder and lightning storm the night before, and then a cool snap the next day, and this bread is alive. All this dough is alive, and you've just got to see what's going to suit it best to meet your needs within a 12-hour period. So you start with a bag of flour, and all of these things appear by the next morning. So it's a lot more finessey and a lot more fun and creative than I think people that want to scare people out of baking by just acting like it's just too scientific to grab hold of. Don't let it intimidate you. Just get in there.
No, and people were, doing the sourdough starters all through COVID and the lockdown. So the only problem then was at least for me, was getting yeast.
Well,
I mean, people were selling little containers like this.
well, and you can harvest yeast from just about anywhere. You know, if you go to the grocery store and you see some black grapes and you see that sort of white look on the outside of them, that's yeast. So just put it in a jar with some water and flour and come back later and you'll have yeast.
Oh, okay. So the grapes and all.
Yeah. Well, they'll take the grapes out because the yeast will just start growing in the flour and water.
Oh, okay. Excuse me. So let me go back a little bit. And you grew up in the Delta. It was a family farm, which was called Pluto. It went back how many years? And I think, just to tell people, I've talked to you before and interviewed you. Wasn't it like you could have had 200 people working the farm, and then the last time I spoke to you, maybe you had 9 people working the farm?
Well, yeah, and I was not in charge of any of the row crops or that kind of thing, but just like in the history. Well, for instance, this two about 3 weeks ago was my great aunt Mary's 100th birthday, and she's lived the majority of her life out on Pluto. And she went from there being a mule barn with like 40 mules to having a supercomputer in her pocket. So, just trying to imagine, you know, those type of things from going from, now with so much industrial farming out in the Delta, there doesn't even have to be a person driving the tractor. It can now be controlled by, GPS.
Technology.
And
Yeah.
they have a drone that you don't have to spray a whole field. You send the drone over with a heat-seeking camera, and it can tell the difference between different weeds and just squirt that one little spot.
Really? Real?
It's
That's amazing.
phenomenal what's going on in Mississippi. It really is.
Um, what was your inspiration for baking? I mean, you could have done a lot of different things. What was the genesis? What started you on that path to baking?
Um, I always liked hanging out in the kitchen, so I was drawn to be in the kitchen because that just seemed where all the fun was, like it in your home or at an event or a gathering. And I started really liking cooking, but then when I started taking jobs in restaurants, it was like, would you rather clean sweetbreads for a couple of hours in the afternoon, or would you rather make swan chantilly? And then the choice became a little easier.
Right. It was more of a direction. And, I'm just always curious what started people on that path, and to go from the Mississippi Delta to Paris. Wow. How did that come about?
Um, oh, it's a long and sordid tale. I'm just kidding. I had been working at a bookstore and started reading cookbooks, and my job was to like bake something out of whatever cookbook they were trying to sell, and I did that in Oxford, Mississippi, and up in Aspen, and then started getting jobs working in restaurants, and just really caught the bug for it. And if you're an 18-year-old woman and you want to get out of Yazoo City, not that it's a terrible place, but you want to just see a bit of the world, if you could get kitchen skills, you can get a job anywhere. So seemed like the quickest way to get on the move, I guess.
Okay. So, we've talked about it, the bakery, Loblolly.
Loblolly.
Pronounce it for me.
Loblolly. It is a type of pine tree. We are in the pine belt of Mississippi, it's a big hub city. You're about an hour and a half from Mobile, an hour and a half from New Orleans, an hour and a half from Jackson, Mississippi, and you've got easy access to the Gulf of Mexico, and it's a great lumber region, and so that's why it's the pine belt. And loblolly is the specific tree that really led to this area being, you know,
The growth.
growth. Yeah.
Okay. La Brea Bakery. So you were there really when it was Nancy Silverton in what, early 90s?
Yes, that would have been probably around 92, I would think.
It was before they expanded. You were on at La Brea, that was on La Brea Avenue.
Right, right. That was a great neighborhood. I lived, everybody's like, how did you deal with the traffic in LA? And I said, I didn't ever have to deal with the traffic in LA because I could walk to the bakery, I could walk to the farmer's market, and I could walk to an Afro-Cuban jazz club and the library. So it's like I never really drove that much in LA.
You know, you said Afro-Cuban. I saw on your Facebook page that you really follow jazz. And I was wondering if when you're in the bakery, is it silent? Are you playing jazz or in headphones?
This is so funny. We just had this whole music uh, thing. My husband is loves music, and we have a lot of similar tastes, but then we have a lot of different tastes. But when we're baking, it's it's more rolling than rocking when until you get to the very end of your shift. And so Donald always tries to craft these playlists where you start with, like, some slow jams, then you might move into a little more jazzy or something, and then by the time you've got to start filling the cases and doing all of that, it's just like it amps up. So that's pretty funny. But I come from a family that my uncle was a record producer, and my cousin is a bass player, and um, my uncle wrote a book, Up from the Cradle of Jazz, about New Orleans music since World War II. And so we really grew up with a lot of music around us.
So I saw that Hattiesburg is where the new bakery is, that it was a huge turnout first week, and things are still going gangbusters.
People have been so gracious, and really welcomed us so much. And Donald and I previously, we worked together when we first met. He was my head baker at the Bottle Tree Bakery up in Oxford, and then we had a bakery together in Greenwood called Mockingbird. But those were little small town, downtown, um, walk up type of places. And we have right now about 40,000 cars that pass in front of the bakery, and we back up to the University of Southern Mississippi that has 17,000 students and like 3,000, um, staff.
Residents, yeah.
Yeah. And so Hattiesburg is a hopping little town. It's kind of a top secret town. It's great.
Yeah.
I think my husband just drove up from work. So
Well, maybe he'll pop in and wave
I can
hello.
see the Loblolly van.
When I was putting this together, I was going, when I think of Southern food, and I think when most people think of the East Coast, they think of Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, maybe Alabama. And you're contending with Tennessee, you have Memphis, you said you're an hour and a half from New Orleans. And what foods, I mean, your books that you've done, Screen Doors and Iced Tea, was telling stories, but what foods do you think are generated from the Mississippi area? I mean, I know there's convergence of many different
Like
things, but
over 13, I might have the number wrong, but it's over, I think, 13 million servings of rice are grown in a 3-county area in Mississippi. And then you look at the oyster production down on the Gulf Coast and the shrimpers. And right now, blueberry farming has gotten huge in Mississippi. And so it's a great amalgamation of food in Mississippi because we've got Gulf Coast seafood galore, and it's got a huge Vietnamese influence on the coast. And so that's really cool. Then we've got a lot of sort of old school catfish shacks on, side roads. And then we've got things like some really, remarkable chefs, like up in Oxford. You look at Vish and what he's got going on up there. And then also you've got this New Orleans influence coming up from one side, but then you've also got hickory smoked barbecue influence coming from this side. And then you've got the whole Arkansas scene over here that you've got, pool hall slaw, and then you get a lot of the Florida influence. So like in Greenwood, one of the most popular dishes is pompano fish, is to have pompano. And you in like in the middle of on a town that's not on a gulf, why would that be so popular? But it's the way Mississippi travels,
Right.
I think one thing that is so comparable is, our state slogan is the birthplace of American music. And as much as Mississippi music is such an amalgamation of all of these different influences, so is our food. And I've always thought like the Delta was like a clutch of little small towns, but when you put them all together, it's a very sophisticated food scene.
You did in one interview, it might have been with Denise Vivaldo.
Oh, I love Denise.
Yeah, I had her on the show a ways back. She is one heck of a personality. You were talking about gravy, brown gravy. Do I need to say anything more and you'll pick up on it and how
Well,
it travels?
where is the brown gravy, white gravy divide?
Yep.
I say it's when you get a little bit west of Natchitoches, Louisiana. Your gravy starts getting whiter and whiter. If you go further towards the Carolinas, your gravy gets a little browner. What are the gravy tendencies in the Baltimore area?
Well,
Red Italian tomato gravy, right?
there's Italian tomato gravy, but in Baltimore, one of the trends, and this was growing up, we would go to the drugstore. We have Cotties here, which we served. We talked about IACP at Baltimore 2005. We had Cotties there. Codfish cakes. It was a substitute for crab cakes, and it really started with the influx of the Jewish immigrants who were keeping kosher. But we go for Cotties and a Coke or go get French fries with gravy. And it was always brown gravy. That was the ultimate. That was before we knew about poutine.
I know.
Up north.
Well, gravy fries, please. You get them at the drive-in in Yazoo City. They didn't have cheese curds, but
yeah. But I worked in Atlantic City the summer of 1960 something, and I would get fries with gravy. And the people would look at me and go, oh, you're putting gravy? I said, you put gravy on mashed potatoes. What's the big deal? But yeah, that was one of the things.
There's grown up an entire gravy fry industry.
There's actually a business here that does fries, but they do Asian fries. It's all built about the fries. I can't think of the name of the place. I wanted to go ahead.
I had a curious conversation today about, I was wondering how much do you think post-COVID that there have been so many businesses that just become super, super specialized? Like, we just sell bundt cakes, or we just sell this cookie in the middle of the night, or we just sell, do you see that trend continuing up there?
Well, we have the bun cake store, we have the cookie store. Um, I always thought from a marketing standpoint, you really narrow the focus. You know, that's it. If you're not in the mood for the bun cake, I don't know how it sustains, but
That's the thing that we're struggling with right now. It's like, you can't be all things to all people, but at the same time, um, you know, let's just try everything and see what folks like.
yeah.
So it's it and with supply chain stuff, it's really hard to know um, how much do you specialize, how much do you uh, try to just put everything out there, or one of the things is maybe we just become more and more neighborhoody of our community and just see what does this community want, not what is the trend. We just want
Right.
service to the people that are going to be around us, and
Well, I think post COVID that people are, or restaurants are tuning down. And they're also smaller menus. And I mean, white tablecloth dining was on the descent for a while. That was before COVID. But I mean, there are new places opening up here in Baltimore.
there's a lot of new exciting projects that I've seen out there, and I I'm thrilled to be seeing all the possibilities that are out there, but also it's a whole new world now. You know, um, every,
Everything's available to you.
right, right. But you just
Go
don't know when
ahead.
it's going to get here.
The, you know, you have the two cookbooks, and, we've posted them up here, Screen Doors and Iced Tea. I'm saying iced tea, but I'm not sure it was iced tea. Yeah, Screen Doors and Sweet Tea, and won the James Beard Award, which I had, and a Southerly course. You were such a fabulous storyteller, and there was somebody writing about you, and they talked about when you were up at Pluto at the family farm, that the best thing you could do is you come in your kitchen and you'd say, "Come sit on the kitchen bed," and it was padded seating, and just to hear you tell your stories. And writing has really opened up the door for you. But you have co-written other books. Um, your most recent, it was with Asha Gomez, who's living in Atlanta, but she's from southern India. And the one book was I Cook in Color, and her other book was My Two Souths. How did you two meet? How did that collaboration even begin?
a, a really smart woman named Janice Dono, who is a literary agent, hooked us up together, and um, that was a really fascinating collaboration. And one of the things that I love about working on books with a chef is because I get to pretend. I mean, you write two books about yourself. Really, what else is there? Yourself in your kitchen. What else is there to say? And so you get to like listen to somebody else's stories. So getting to hear about Asha's life travels from the most southern tip of India to New York to Atlanta, and her transforming these foods into like a shrimp creole, but with green cardamom in it. And hearing her stories and getting to help her do that. And then for her second book, I Cook in Color, it was great because she was really kind of, I guess, tired of being pigeonholed of like only cooking Indian food or putting an Indian spin on things. And she makes a delicious, like puttanesca. She makes a wonderful pavlova. And, that's not, it was something that it was important to her to put out there. And the same thing with Kimberly Schlotman, who's a member of the band Little Big Town. When I was structuring her book, to help her tell her story. The things that were important to her were family, friends, music, home, and away, because she spent so much time traveling on the road, cooking in this band uh, bus, or series of buses. And so
Right.
get to help her tell her story and get to know them. So you get to kind of pretend to be a country music star for a year, or to pretend to be, a famous Indian chef for a year and help them tell their stories. It's a privilege, it really is.
Well, your writing career, you left Mississippi and you went up to Minneapolis, Minnesota. You went to Minnesota. I'm trying to think where you went. You went Pillsbury.
Hmm.
You got a job as an editor and writer there. Had you ever done recipes before then? How did that
No,
job?
but having worked in bookstores as a cafe cook in bookstores, I read a couple of thousand cookbooks probably, and so uh, it was a wonderful experience. I worked for two great women, Andy Bidwell and Jackie Sheehan, and it was a recipe writing boot camp. And working for them, every recipe had to have a photograph, so you got time to work in the photography studio at Tadware, and it was I learned so much.
Well, that was a good basis. I mean, I did an interview with you. You were one of the key food stylists for the movie The Help, and you can't put that off. I mean, that was amazing how much they showed in food.
I did
And
famous pie. I can head you off with that one.
I know you didn't, but it was another Martha, wasn't it, who did it? Martha, I'm
No,
trying to,
oh, her name's not Martha. It's Leanne Fleming.
okay. Okay. But what memory serves me and my notes serve me that the community itself came in because the amount of food that they needed. So this person, somebody you went to school with,
Oh,
styled some.
it was just so many people. Our friend Mary Hoover, she was making cakes. Donnie Whitehead was making pralines. We had Leanne was making all of the pies. She was making casseroles. I was baking gingerbread cakes. I mean gingerbread houses in August, and then they got left on the cutting room floor. And then people just turned out in droves, because if you were filming a huge banquet scene, you know, by the time you do it all day, that's a lot of rumaki. Then we had to make Peking duck for the scene in the with the agent in New York, and my duck got left on the cutting room floor too. I think maybe like a leg passes by for a second.
All that work.
I know.
Um, the food styling I've done is pretty simple. When it was the days when the cookbook authors toured and they went to local TV stations, and I would do the food. And I helped Dan Macy, who you should
Oh,
know from,
no.
yeah, whoever it was, his person got sick. He called me, and I was working in a truck, and food is falling. I was just, um, we got it done. But after looking at the commercials and everything we went through just to get, for this 15-second spot was amazing. And
Now,
things end up on the
now
floor.
it
Yeah.
might not have to be cooked. It can just be AI.
Now, yeah. Uh, you had said when talking about the movie and working on there and doing the food that there are no stunt eaters. Actors have food allergies or dietary needs that come up, and you had to come up with a palatable solution. So that brings me to Jessica Chastain, who played the blonde bombshell in the fried chicken story. So I'll let you tell that.
Well, she was, or is, I don't know what her current status is, but vegan, and was, I think, going for a cruelty-free lifestyle. And there was a scene where she had to bite into a fried chicken drumstick. And so I was tasked with creating a vegan drumstick. So I got a, after numerous things of trying to like coat and fry like a little baby squash or something like that, it ended up being a popsicle stick with a tofu hot dog stuck in it so it would look like the dark meat next to the bone, and then wrapped in tofurkey, and then wrapped in vegan pie dough, then dipped in almond milk and rolled in uh, breadcrumbs and and flour, and then deep fried. And so I thought, well, this looks pretty good. So the director was like, yeah, but we want to shoot it from over her shoulder, so when she bites into it, it needs to look like the inside of a turkey leg. And I was like, well, the only thing that looks like the inside of a turkey leg is a turkey leg. I was like, I'll be the stunt biter. And but no. But then in the next scene, I think she's like snatching a chicken up by its neck. So I don't know. Or its feet, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. There's another book that you've done. A Good Meal is Hard to Find. You co-authored with Amy Evans. And the description is, it's more than just a cookbook. It's a love letter to the women and food of the Deep South. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
It was just a wonderful project to work with. Amy was the oral historian for Southern Foodways for over a decade, and is a fabulous painter and artist. And she's currently living down in Houston, Texas. And the titles of her painting are things like Madge took her usual measurements. And in the painting, it's a can of Texan grapefruit, a ruler, and I don't have it right here in front of me. But I always told Amy, I think your paintings would make hilarious head notes for recipes. And so after years of bugging her about it, we finally sat down and had a wonderful time, because we just conjured up all these fictional head notes for all of the recipes about these pretend friends of ours. And by the time we got through with the book, we're like, well, Velma would have never actually done that because of this other person. And they're just little stories that are only, maybe 8 sentences long at most. And they're coupled with one of Amy's paintings and then a recipe. So we worked on the head notes together. Amy did the paintings, and then we both kind of crafted what the food should be that
Right.
go on with it. So there's no food photography in that book, which I really like, because it takes the pressure off. And our grandmothers didn't have a photo of every single recipe. They didn't Instagram what it's supposed to look like, because then it looks like everybody else's.
Right.
So, I think it's a little bit freeing not to have that added pressure, peer pressure for your plate.
Yeah. I want to ask you, I see I'm going a little bit long. I don't want to keep you too long here. What was it? What is Mississippi surf and turf?
Pork chop and crawfish.
Okay.
Or it could be a venison backstrap and crawfish.
All right. Just it popped up. I was curious to see what it was. We've come to the time where I ask some of my questions, sort of like the actor studio. I have some typical questions. What was the best bite you had all week?
Ooh, that's a toughie. Might be my husband's bagel chips, but he don't let you say that, because then he'll have to make more and more of them. But he makes these wonderful homemade bagels, and they're shaved like just razor thin and then brushed with olive oil and sea salt and toasted again. And they're lacy textured, and that might be better. Or his wild rice baguette. I don't know, one of the two.
Okay.
Or his lettuce sandwich. That was pretty good too.
Okay. If you could go back and give your 18-year-old self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, I guess go see more and more.
Travel more.
Yeah, and you don't have to go far to go see something.
Yep. All right. And I'm sure there's been one or two. What was your ultimate culinary fail?
That is so many. I don't know even where to begin with that one. I did burn a batch of like 200 croissants with a huge line in front of Campanile on like my first week of working there, with like the smoke billowing out in front of tons of standing in line looking through a plate glass window. That was a pretty big one.
Yep. And you still stayed on.
I had to then.
Okay. If you wake up tomorrow morning with a new talent, what would the new talent be?
Singer.
Okay. What didn't I ask you that I should have?
How's this heat wave ever going to end?
Pardon me?
Is this heat wave ever going to end? I don't know
Oh,
how.
the heat wave ever going to end? Well, that's a big question mark. Is the heat wave ever going to end? Eventually, we'll then go to sub temperatures and it'll be freezing, maybe not down by the Gulf, but I know you're looking forward to that 113 degrees tomorrow. I think it's 101 supposed to be there today. So, mild day. I want to remind people they're used to it. Everything about Martha, her books, her website, marthafoose.com, Loblolly Bakery.com. Just put it in, you'll find it on Instagram. And is it the restaurateur that's part of Loblolly, Robert St.
He is
John?
the spearhead. He is the one that is behind this whole shebang, and has been just remarkably supportive. He's like been saying, "Come down here. This town needs a bakery. Come down here. This town needs a bakery," and sure enough, he was right. But you know, we're I think this is day 8, maybe. So he's just a marvel. And between all of his other restaurants, he has the New South Restaurant Group, and also a food columnist column about just living every day. So check out robertstjohn.com, because he's a marvel, and it's making this whole thing happen.
That's terrific. Well, I want to thank you for being on the show. And when I interviewed you the last time, I had a note that you ended the show with, "You be sweet." Does that sound familiar?
Sounds like something I'd say.
Well, let me just say, Martha Foose, you be sweet. Thank you, and continued success. And I hope you get your body rhythm in sync with this baking.
Well, we try to be just sweet enough.
Okay. Have a good one, and thank you again.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right. Griffin must have been sleeping at the switch. All right. So I always try to add a little food tidbit of the week. I have a little trick that I do. When you make pasta and you put hot pasta in a cold dish, it creates condensation, especially when you put the hot sauce over it. You can heat your bowl, but I'm going to be dumping most of that pasta water, so I put the strainer over the bowls. I strain off most of the pasta water, put some back in with my pasta, but that water has then heated the bowls. And if I need extra pasta water to sort of zhuzh up my sauce, my ragu, I have it. So that's my little tidbit, and you won't have any condensation. All right, so next week's guest is Becky Diamond. She is a food writer, librarian, and research historian. She has been writing about food since 2008, parlaying her passion for food and history into her just released publication of the Gilded Age cookbook. The American Gilded Age runs from 1868 to 1900, and its extreme extravagance continued to be a source of wonder and fascination, particularly for foodies. The style and excessiveness of this era has ties to modern popular culture through books, films, and television shows, including The Alienist and Julian Fellowes' TV series The Gilded Age on HBO. Gilded Age details and entertaining stories of celebrities from the era the Vanderbilts, Astors, Gullits, and Rockefellers are melded with historic menus and recipes updated for modern kitchens. Other books by Becky Diamond are $1,000 Dinner and Mrs. Goodfellow, The Story of America's First Cooking School. Also, monthly, J Moore is giving away a $50 gift card to some of your favorite restaurants. Visit jmooreliving.com/contest to enter to win. If you need to reach me, you can reach me at my email, which is food@jmooreliving.com, or Instagram @Dara Cooks. All shows are immediately archived in video form on J Moore Living's Facebook page and jmooreliving.com. Feel free to dig into our video archives of past shows. We truly appreciate it when you share the show with friends and family. And as always, as I like to end the show, may your plates always remain full. I hope to see you next Thursday.